The morning sun touched the tall glass windows of one of the biggest office buildings in the city. The tower stood like a giant in the middle of the streets, shining with power and wealth. Inside, the air was filled with the smell of expensive coffee, the sound of clicking heels, and the soft ringing of phones. This was not an ordinary place. It was the kingdom of the CEO, a man who believed he ruled not just the company, but the people inside it too. The CEO walked into his luxury office with the same confidence he wore every single day. He wore a sharp suit, a watch that could buy a small car, and shoes so polished they looked like mirrors. Every step of his carried pride, arrogance, and the weight of money. Employees stood up as he passed by, their eyes filled with both respect and fear. Some greeted him softly, but no one dared to speak loudly in his presence. He was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voices. Presence was enough to silence a room. He sat in his large leather chair, looking out at the city skyline. A smile stretched across his face as he leaned back. "Another day, another victory," he said, almost to himself, but loud enough for those standing nearby to hear. "This company runs because of my mind. Without me, nothing works." Everyone nodded, even if they didn't agree. No one wanted to challenge him. His pride was his weapon, and his anger was a storm no one wished to face. But that day was different. That day, something unusual happened. In the corner of the office stood a big machine, one that had stopped working the night before. It was important for the day's presentation, a machine that displayed data, numbers, and models that investors needed to see. Without it, the CEO's perfect meeting would fall apart. An employee nervously stepped forward. "Sir, the machine is not working. We tried restarting it, but nothing happens." The CEO turned his head sharply. His smile faded, replaced by irritation. "Not working?" he repeated, as if the very idea was insulting. "Do you people only know how to sit and type? Can no one in this room fix a simple problem?" The employees looked down, scared to answer. No one dared to meet his eyes. Then, from the far side of the room, a quiet sound was heard. It was the janitor pushing his cart. His uniform was faded, his hands were rough, and his shoes had long lost their shine. He came every morning to clean the offices, wipe the glass, and empty the trash. Most people didn't even notice him. He was like a shadow in the grand building, always present, yet invisible. He stopped for a moment, watching the crowd around the machine. His eyes, sharp and thoughtful, studied the problem silently. But before he could move, the CEO noticed him. The CEO's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Look at this," he said loudly, so everyone could hear. "Our great engineers can't fix it. Maybe the janitor can save the day." The room filled with nervous laughter. Some laughed because they wanted to please the boss. Others laughed because they were afraid not to. But all eyes turned toward the janitor. The janitor didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He stood still, holding the handle of his cart. His face calm and unreadable. The CEO, enjoying the attention, leaned back in his chair. His voice carried arrogance as he spoke again. "Tell you what. If you fix this machine, something my best men couldn't do, I'll give you my car." He pointed outside the window, where a shiny black luxury car sat in the parking lot, glowing under the sunlight. Yes, that one. A car worth more than your entire life. The room erupted with laughter again. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. It was a joke. A cruel one, but a joke nonetheless. The CEO laughed the loudest, enjoying the mockery, enjoying the way the janitor was being belittled. But the janitor's face didn't change. His calm eyes met the CEO's, and for a moment the room fell silent. There was something unsettling about that look. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something that made the laughter fade, one chuckle at a time. The CEO noticed it too. He cleared his throat, trying to break the strange silence. "Well, what do you say?" he mocked. "Do you think you can do what my people couldn't? Do you think you can fix it?" The janitor slowly placed the cleaning cloth back on his cart. His movements were deliberate, quiet, and steady. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. He walked closer to the machine, each step echoing in the silent room. People whispered among themselves. Is he really going to try? What does he know about machines? This'll be fun to watch. The janitor reached the machine and stopped. He ran his fingers lightly over its surface, studying it carefully. His eyes narrowed, as if he saw something the others had missed. He didn't speak. He didn't boast. He simply looked at the problem, as if the machine itself was whispering its secret to him. The CEO smirked. Go ahead, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Show us your magic, or prove that you're only good for scrubbing floors. The janitor turned his head slowly toward him. His expression was calm, almost too calm. It wasn't the look of a man who was about to be humiliated. It was the look of someone who knew something no one else did. The employees leaned forward, their eyes glued to the scene. The laughter had stopped. The air grew heavy with tension. Something was about to happen, and no one could look away. The janitor bent down, inspecting the wires at the back of the machine. He touched one of them gently, then another. His hands moved with surprising confidence, not like someone guessing, like someone who understood. The CEO watched, still smiling, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. For the first time, he felt a small doubt creep into his mind. The janitor straightened up, his face still calm. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than any words. The room waited. The suspense grew thicker with every passing second. Would he really try to fix it? Would he fail and become the joke of the day? Or would something far more shocking happen? Something that would change the balance of power in that office forever. The janitor's calm look held the answer, but no one knew what it was yet. And that was how the story began. The office was still heavy with an unusual silence. The echoes of laughter that had filled the room moments ago were gone. They had died as quickly as they had started, replaced by a strange tension that no one could explain. All eyes were fixed on one man, the janitor. He stood beside the machine, his rough hands resting calmly by his sides. He wasn't sweating, he wasn't nervous, and he wasn't trying to defend himself against the cruel joke that had been thrown at him. Instead, his face carried a kind of calmness that unsettled the people watching. It was not the face of a man about to be embarrassed. It was the face of someone who knew more than he was letting on. The CEO, sitting in his tall chair, leaned forward with a mocking grin. Go ahead, he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Fix it. Show us all that you are more than a man with a mop. The words echoed in the room, but the janitor did not flinch. He didn't rush toward the machine to prove himself. He didn't argue. He simply stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch until it became almost uncomfortable. His eyes scanned the machine, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity. Employees whispered among themselves. Why is he so calm? Does he really think he can fix it? This is going to be embarrassing. But deep inside, a few of them felt something else doubt. They had seen his eyes. They had seen that strange stillness. And it was not the look of a fool walking into a trap. The janitor slowly bent down and touched the machine's side. His fingers moved carefully, brushing away the dust around the wires. He didn't speak, but his silence made the moment louder than any words. Each motion was deliberate, as if he was reading the story hidden in the metal and wires. The CEO chuckled. Look at him, pretending like he knows what he's doing. This will be over in seconds. The employees laughed weakly, but their voices lacked the confidence of before. Their eyes never left the janitor's hands. He moved around the machine, kneeling down, studying every part of it. His face carried no sign of doubt. Instead, his brows lowered in focus, and his lips pressed into a thin line. It was the face of a man who had solved problems before, perhaps bigger ones than this. One young employee leaned close to another and whispered, Do you think he actually knows about machines? The other shook his head quickly. No, he's just stalling. He's a janitor, not an engineer. But their voices trembled with uncertainty. The janitor's silence continued to grow heavier. It was a silence that made even the CEO shift uncomfortably in his chair. He tapped his fingers on the desk, trying to act relaxed, but his eyes kept drifting back to the machine. For the first time, his laughter felt forced. Careful, the CEO said loudly, trying to regain control of the moment. "Don't break it completely. Or maybe I'll make you pay for it from your small salary." The room chuckled again, but the sound was weak. The confidence in their laughter was gone. The janitor finally looked up. His eyes locked on the CEO's, calm and steady. It was not a look of challenge, but of quiet certainty. That look alone made the room silent once more. He didn't say a single word. He didn't need to. Instead, he turned back to the machine, slowly reaching for one of the small tools in his cleaning cart. It was not a professional tool, just a simple screwdriver, slightly rusted from years of use. The sight of it made some employees snicker quietly. But as he held it in his hand, his grip was firm, practiced, and steady. He did not look like a man pretending. He looked like a man who had done this many times before. The CEO leaned back again, forcing another laugh. "Oh, this will be good," he muttered. "A janitor with a screwdriver, fixing what my top engineers couldn't." But even as he laughed, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question he didn't want to hear. What if he actually does it? The janitor crouched again, opening a small panel at the back of the machine. The employees leaned forward, unable to look away. His hands moved carefully, touching each wire, checking each connection. His face remained calm, his movements slow but confident. Minutes passed in silence. The only sound was the soft click of metal against metal as he worked. The room full of people managers, assistants, and even the powerful CEO watched quietly. As if they were students in front of a teacher, no one noticed it, but something had changed in the room. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time, it was not the CEO who commanded attention. It was the janitor, the employees. Once eager to laugh, now held their breath. Each small motion of his hands carried suspense. Was he about to fix it? Was he about to fail? No one knew, and that mystery was enough to silence even the proudest voices in the room. The CEO crossed his arms, trying to mask his unease. "You're wasting time," he said sharply, but his voice lacked the strength it carried earlier. It was no longer the confident tone of a man in control. It was the defensive tone of someone who felt his pride slipping. The janitor didn't respond. He continued to work silently, as if the CEO's words didn't exist. Finally, he paused. His hand rested on one particular wire, his eyes narrowing. His calm expression hardened into focus. Something about that wire seemed wrong. He had noticed it when no one else did. He adjusted it slightly, then tightened a small screw. The sound was almost nothing, but in the heavy silence of the office, it echoed like thunder. The employees leaned even closer, their eyes wide. The CEO shifted in his chair, his fingers gripping the armrest tighter than before. The janitor stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his uniform. His face was still calm, but his eyes carried a quiet fire. He stepped back from the machine, his silence louder than any announcement. The room froze. The air was thick with tension. Something had changed, something invisible but powerful. The employees stared at the machine. Would it work? Would this silent man really succeed where experts had failed? The CEO's smile faltered. His heart beat faster, though he tried to hide it. He told himself it was impossible. It had to be impossible. But the janitor's silence, the way he moved, the way he looked, said otherwise. And as everyone stood waiting, the suspense grew unbearable. Would the machine come back to life? Would the janitor shock them all? Or would he become the joke the CEO always wanted him to be? The answer was only a heartbeat away, and the entire office waited for it in silence. The office felt like a courtroom. The janitor was at the center of the trial. Everyone was waiting, silent, as if their very breath depended on what he would do next. The CEO leaned forward in his chair, his mocking grin slowly fading into something more uneasy. The janitor bent down once more, his old screwdriver in hand. His fingers, rough from years of hard work, gripped the tool with surprising steadiness. He wasn't rushing, and he wasn't nervous. Every move seemed calculated, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. The employees exchanged looks. Some rolled their eyes, still convinced this was a joke. Others frowned, secretly unsure. His calmness was unsettling. A man about to embarrass himself should have been trembling. Instead, he looked like he had done this before. The CEO cleared his throat. "Well," he said sharply, his voice louder than necessary, "what are you waiting for? Afraid? Or just pretending to be brave?" The janitor didn't respond. His silence was becoming more powerful than words. He crouched again, peering into the machine's interior, his eyes narrowing as he studied the wires and switches. Then came the moment. His hand moved quickly. He pressed one switch and twisted a loose wire back into place. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed faintly in the quiet room. It was nothing dramatic, but to the tense crowd, it was everything. Gasps escaped from a few employees. "Wait, did you see that?" One whispered. "He touched something, like he knows exactly what he's doing." Another replied. The CEO forced a laugh, though his voice cracked slightly. "Don't get excited. Anyone can wiggle a wire. That doesn't mean he's fixing anything." But even he leaned closer in his seat, his eyes glued to the janitor's hands. The janitor reached deeper, moving another wire carefully. His fingers traced the lines as if he could feel the problem hidden inside. His face remained focused, calm, and unshaken. Finally, he pulled out a small piece of dust-clogged debris, something no one had noticed before. He held it between his fingers for a moment, then flicked it onto the floor without a word. The room grew restless. Some people whispered again, their voices shaking with confusion. Did he just find the problem? No, that can't be it. Can it? The janitor didn't answer their doubts. He simply placed the panel back into position and gave the machine a gentle pat, almost like reassuring a child. Then, slowly, he reached for the power switch. The entire office froze. All eyes locked onto the machine. The CEO's grin vanished completely. His jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the chair's armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. The janitor paused with his hand over the switch. He didn't rush. He waited, as if giving the room time to feel the weight of what was about to happen. His silence, his composure, it all built a suspense that felt unbearable. Finally, the calm and steady motion, he flipped the switch. The machine gave a faint click. Then, nothing. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the room. The CEO leaned back, a smug smile creeping back onto his face. "See? Just like I thought. He's wasting our time." But the janitor didn't move away. He kept his eyes on the machine, his expression unchanging. He adjusted the switch again, slightly this time, almost like he was listening to the machine's heartbeat. And then, a faint hum. It was soft at first, so soft most people thought they imagined it. But then it grew louder, steadier. The machine's lights flickered once, twice, and then glowed bright. The room gasped as one. It's working," someone whispered. The hum of the machine filled the office, echoing against the walls. Numbers began appearing on the screen. Lines of data glowing clearly, as though nothing had ever been wrong. The employees looked at one another in shock. Their mouths hung open, their eyes wide with disbelief. The CEO froze in his seat. His face turned pale, his eyes locked on the machine. He couldn't hide it anymore. His smugness was gone. For the first time, fear slipped into his gaze. The janitor stepped back slowly, wiping his hands on his uniform. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He simply stood there, calm as ever, as if what he had done was nothing extraordinary. But to the people watching, it was everything. The whispers grew louder. How did he do that? Even the engineers couldn't fix it. Who is this man? The CEO's lips trembled. He tried to form words, but nothing came. His promise echoed in everyone's minds. "If you fix this, the car is yours." The janitor glanced at him briefly, his eyes steady, his face unreadable. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence carried more weight than any words could. The employee's eyes moved from the machine to the janitor, then to the CEO. A new kind of tension filled the room, one that the CEO could not control. The laughter was gone. The mockery was gone. All that remained was shock, disbelief, and a rising sense of respect for the man they had all overlooked. The CEO swallowed hard, his pride burning like fire inside him. He wanted to laugh it off, to say it was luck, a coincidence. But deep down, he knew the truth. The janitor had done what his experts could not. The janitor turned away from the machine, walking slowly back toward his cart. His movements were quiet, unhurried, but every step echoed like thunder in the silent office. The employees followed him with their eyes, their whispers filling the air. The CEO sat frozen, trapped between his arrogance and the truth. And as the janitor reached his cart, the silence became unbearable. Everyone waited for what would happen next. Would the CEO honor his promise? Would he try to escape his words? Or would this moment become the beginning of something far bigger than anyone had expected? The janitor stopped, his back still facing the room, his head tilted slightly as though he was thinking. Then slowly, he turned his eyes back to the CEO. The calmness was still there. But this time, was something more in his gaze, something that made the CEO's chest tighten with fear. The janitor didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was the loudest voice in the room, and everyone knew this was only the beginning. The office still buzzed with shock. The machine was alive again, humming steadily, as if it had never been broken. But the silence in the room was louder than the hum. The janitor had returned to his cart, his head lowered, his face unreadable. He did not demand attention, yet every eye followed him. The CEO sat frozen in his leather chair. His lips were pressed tightly together, his pride bleeding from the inside. The promise he had made still rang in everyone's ears. Fix this, and the car is yours. But for now, the janitor said nothing. He simply stood there, quiet, like a shadow, waiting for the storm to pass. Yet behind those calm eyes, his mind was not here in the office. His thoughts drifted away, pulled back into a past he rarely allowed himself to visit. A past filled with struggle, loss, and silent battles. Flashback begins many years ago. Long before he pushed a cleaning cart through shining office floors, he had been someone else. A young man with dreams bigger than the city itself. He remembered the weight of heavy books in his backpack, the smell of oil and metal in the university labs, and the sleepless nights spent studying machines back then. People had called him engineer. Professors had praised his sharp mind. Classmates had turned to him whenever a machine jammed or a project failed. His hands, now rough from scrubbing floors, had once been the hands of promise hands that could bring dead machines back to life. He could still hear his late father's voice. Work hard, son. One day you'll build things the world has never seen. Don't waste your gift. But life was not kind. During his final year of study, tragedy struck. His father fell ill, the hospital bills piling higher than the books on his desk. His mother's tears stained her clothes every night. The young man had to choose his dreams or his family's survival, and without hesitation, chose his family. He left his classes, tucked away his textbooks, and stepped into a world of hard labor. Factories, workshops, and finally, janitorial work jobs no one wanted. But jobs that paid enough to buy medicine, food, and a roof. His dreams slipped from his hands like sand, but he never complained. Day after day, he pushed a broom. Night after night, he lay awake, remembering the sound of machines. The thrill of solving problems, the pride in his father's eyes. He had talent, yes, but talent does not always win against fate. Years passed. People stopped seeing him as the man with ideas. They saw only the uniform, the mop, the cart. They called him Janitor, as if his real name had been erased. But inside, the fire never died. Every time he walked past broken machines, every time he saw someone struggling with a tool, his fingers twitched with the urge to help. He remembered what it felt like to solve problems, to create, to be respected. He hid that part of himself, burying it deep, because what good was talent when the world only saw your clothes? Until today, back to the present, the janitor blinked slowly, pulling himself out of the memory. He was back in the CEO's office, back in front of the stunned crowd. The machine was alive, and so was the silence. He glanced briefly at the employees. Their eyes no longer carried mockery. They carried questions. Who was he really? How did a janitor do what they could not? The CEO shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control of the room. He slammed his hand on the desk, forcing a laugh. Don't just stand there staring like fools. It was luck. Anyone could have done that. The words felt weak, hollow. Even he could hear the crack in his own voice. The employees exchanged glances. They wanted to believe their boss, but deep down, they knew the truth. Luck didn't move hands with that much precision. Luck didn't study a machine like that. The janitor turned his gaze toward the CEO for the briefest second. Their eyes locked, and the CEO felt a shiver crawl down his spine. There was no arrogance in that look. No pride, no demand. Just calm certainty, the kind of certainty that came from years of knowledge. From silent struggles no one else had seen. The CEO quickly looked away, clearing his throat. Enough wasting time. We have work to do, he barked, trying to change the subject. Everyone, prepare for the presentation. But the employees weren't listening. Their whispers grew louder. He used to be someone, I can feel it. That wasn't luck. That was skill. Who is he really? The janitor didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than the CEO's orders. He pushed his cart slowly toward the door, each step echoing in the tense room. His heart carried the weight of the past, but his face carried only calmness. He had lived through worse storms than this. Still, as he walked away, a thought lingered in his mind. This is not over. The CEO will not forget today. And neither will I. Cliffhanger the janitor reached the doorway. For a moment he paused, his hand resting on the cart handle. He turned his head slightly, just enough for the light from the window to catch his tired but determined eyes. The CEO stared at him, his pride screaming inside. He knew this man was more than he appeared, and that scared him. The janitor gave one last calm glance, then stepped out of the room. The door closed softly behind him, but its echo felt louder than thunder. The employees sat frozen. The CEO clenched his fists, his mind racing. This was not the end. This was only the beginning, and deep inside. Everyone knew the real story was just starting to unfold. The office atmosphere remained heavy long. After the janitor closed the door, the machine hummed steadily, but it only reminded everyone of what had just happened. The laughter from earlier was gone. The employees shuffled nervously at their desks, pretending to work. But their minds replayed the janitor's effortless victory over the CEO's mockery. The CEO sat stiffly in his chair, gripping the armrests until his knuckles turned pale. His face burned with humiliation. He had mocked the janitor, offered his car as a joke, and then watched his joke turn into reality. For a man who built his reputation on control and power, this loss of face was unbearable. But the CEO was not a man who accepted defeat quietly. The CEO's restless thoughts. The employees avoided his eyes. The CEO leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts stormed like thunder. Who is this janitor? Where did he learn to do that? He remembered the calm way the janitor's hands had moved, the steady focus in his eyes, the silence that carried confidence. It was not the behavior of a simple cleaner. It was the behavior of someone who knew machines deeply. I cannot let this stand, the CEO thought. If I let him shine once, people will forget who leads this company. They will whisper. They will question me. No, I must put him back in his place. He straightened in his chair, already forming a plan. A trap disguised as a challenge. Later that afternoon, the CEO called a meeting in the main hall. The employees gathered, curious but cautious. The memory of the morning still lingered, making every step feel heavier. The janitor was also present, standing quietly at the back with his cart. He didn't want attention, but attention found him anyway. Heads turned. Eyes followed. Whispers rose again. The CEO walked to the center, his confident smile returning, though it was a mask hiding his bruised pride. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice echoing in the hall. This morning we witnessed something unusual. He paused, letting the tension grow. A broken machine. A janitor who fixed it. Some of you may think it was skill, but I say it was luck, and luck does not last. Murmurs filled the room. Some employees looked down, not daring to disagree, while others exchanged doubtful glances. The CEO raised his hand, silencing them. To prove this once and for all, I will create a challenge, a real test. If our janitor believes he is more than what he appears, let him face it. In front of all of us, gasps ran through the room. A challenge? Against the janitor? The janitor stood still, his eyes calm but alert. He knew this was not a game. This was the CEO's pride, sharpened into a weapon. The unfair conditions, the CEO gestured toward a covered object at the side of the hall. With a dramatic motion, he pulled the cloth away, revealing a large, complex piece of equipment. It was old, rusty, and far more advanced than the machine from earlier. This, the CEO announced, is a prototype engine imported years ago. Even our top engineers failed to get it working. It has been sitting in storage ever since. The employees leaned forward, whispering. They remembered the machine, the failed attempts, the reports filled with red ink. The CEO smirked. If the janitor can fix this in front of us, I will admit he has skill. I will even keep my promise about the car. But if he fails, he let the words hang, then continued coldly. He will be dismissed from this building forever. The employees gasped again. The challenge was not fair, it was a trap. Success meant humiliation for the CEO. Failure meant destruction. For the janitor, all eyes turned to the janitor. The janitor's calm acceptance. The janitor stepped forward slowly. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. He stopped in front of the machine, studying it carefully. The employees held their breath. The CEO folded his arms, confident that this time the janitor would break. The janitor's eyes traced every bolt, every wire, every dent of rust. His mind worked quietly, remembering diagrams, theories, and lessons from long ago. He felt the same pull he had felt in his university days, the challenge of solving what others could not. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. If I fix it, the car is mine. If I fail, I leave. That is your word? The CEO smirked. That is my word. The janitor gave a slow nod. Then I accept. The employees gasped again, shocked by his courage. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others clenched their fists in silent hope. The CEO's smile widened, but inside, unease twisted in his chest. The janitor had not hesitated. That calm acceptance, it was the same confidence he had seen earlier. The work begins, though. Janitor rolled up his sleeves and bent over the machine. His hands moved slowly at first, tracing wires, checking valves, listening to faint clicks. The crowd leaned forward. Hanging on every motion, the CEO stood with his arms crossed, pretending to be calm. Though his eyes never left the janitor, minutes stretched into silence, broken only by the sound of tools clinking against metal. The janitor's face remained calm, but inside his mind raced. This is more complicated than I thought. But every problem has a pattern. Every machine has a language. And I still remember how to listen. The suspense builds. The employees shifted nervously, whispering among themselves. Can he really do it? It looks impossible. What if he fails? He'll lose everything. The CEO overheard their whispers and smiled smugly. Let them hope. Soon they will see him fail. Then he will be gone, and I will have my power back. But deep down, part of him was afraid. The janitor wiped sweat from his forehead, still focused. His hands tightened, bolts adjusted wires, and made notes in his mind. Slowly, the machine began to respond. Not alive yet, but less silent than before. The employees gasped as a faint vibration ran through the frame. The CEO's smile faltered for just a second. Cliffhanger, the janitor leaned closer, adjusting one final wire. The machine gave a sudden spark, a faint glow of life. Gasps filled the hall. The janitor stepped back slightly, his face unreadable. He looked at the machine as if he were standing at the edge of a decision. Would it live or die? The CEO's breath caught in his throat. The employees froze, waiting, and then the machine let out a strange sound, halfway between a hum and a cough. It trembled, but did not fully start. The room grew tenser. The janitor placed his hand gently on the machine, whispering almost to himself, "Not yet." But soon, the hall exploded with whispers. The suspense was unbearable. The CEO's face turned pale. For the first time, he wasn't sure what would happen next, and the story paused there. Hanging between failure and triumph, pulling everyone into the next part, the hall was silent, yet heavy with the sound of waiting. Every eye locked on the janitor, who stood before the old machine, his hand resting gently on its cold surface. The faint spark from earlier still lingered in everyone's memory. The employees held their breath, their hearts beating faster than the ticking clock on the wall. The CEO shifted uncomfortably, his mask of confidence cracking ever so slightly. He had expected laughter, failure, humiliation, but instead, suspense filled the air. The janitor had brought the machine halfway to life. The janitor's face remained calm, but inside his mind raced. "It's more damage than I thought. Years of rust. Broken connections. But machines speak. If you listen carefully, they tell you their secrets." The whisper of memory, as he studied the wires, a memory floated back. A small workshop years ago, his father's tired voice guiding him. "Every machine has a soul. Son, don't just look at it, listen. Hear the rhythm, the silence, the places where it wants to breathe again." Those words had shaped his life. Even now, as a janitor, they guided his hands. He leaned closer, listening, not just with his ears, but with his memory. He tapped the side gently. He tilted his head, catching the faint echo to others. It looked like strange behavior. But to him, it was conversation. The employees' curiosity, the workers whispered nervously at the back. "What is he doing?" "He's not just fixing. He's studying it like an engineer. Maybe he really was someone before this job." The CEO's jaw tightened. He heard their whispers, and each word cut at his pride. He needed control, but the janitor's calmness made him feel powerless. The janitor speaks finally. The janitor straightened, wiping grease on his sleeve. His calm voice broke the silence. This engine was never completed properly. It wasn't just a fault. It was designed incorrectly. That's why your engineers couldn't fix it. The employees gasped. Even the CEO's eyes widened. "Lies," the CEO barked quickly, regaining his voice. "Our engineers are top-trained. You're just a janitor. Don't act like you know better." The janitor's gaze didn't waver. "I don't act, I see." The blueprint was wrong. Whoever built this forgot the balance between intake and release. It's like a heart that tries to beat but chokes on its own breath. The words struck the room with silence. It was too precise, too technical, too real to be brushed away. The employees exchanged stunned looks. Could a simple janitor know this much? Testing his claim, the janitor bent again, adjusting a hidden valve. His fingers moved quickly, remembering long-forgotten lessons. He tightened a bolt, reconnected a wire, and tapped the frame once more. The machine responded with a faint hum. It wasn't alive yet, but it was no longer silent. Gasps filled the air again. The CEO's face flushed red. He snapped, "Enough of this nonsense. He's stalling. He can't fix it." But his voice shook slightly. Deep inside, fear gnawed at him. The weight of the pastas the janitor worked. Flashes of his past rushed through him again, long nights in university labs, drawing sketches of engines. Solving problems others couldn't. Professors had once said he was destined for greatness. But destiny had been stolen by hardship, replaced by a mop and bucket. Now, fate had placed him here again, in front of a challenge he never asked for. And perhaps this was his chance to prove not to the CEO, not to the employees, but to himself that his gift had not died. The suspense rises. The employees leaned forward as the machine shook faintly. A soft vibration spread through the floor. Some clapped their hands over their mouths. Others gripped the edges of their chairs. Is he actually doing it? Someone whispered. The CEO slammed his hand on the table. No, this is just chance again. Don't let him fool you. A broken clock still moves twice a day. He'll fail. But even as he spoke, doubt filled his chest. He couldn't stop watching. The janitor ignored him, lost in the rhythm of his work. His hands moved with certainty, his eyes sharp and focused. To him, the world had narrowed down to the machine and its hidden voice. The turning point, finally, he stepped back. He pressed one final switch. The room went still. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched long and heavy. The CEO's lips curved into a smirk. Yes, failure, finally. But then the machine gave a sudden cough, followed by a deep, steady hum. Lights flickered on its panel. The gears began to turn slowly, then faster, smoother. The sound filled the hall like a heartbeat returning to life. The employees gasped loudly, some even clapping their hands in disbelief. It's working. He actually did it. No way. The CEO's smirk shattered. His eyes widened in horror. The CEO's fear the janitor stood quietly, his expression calm as ever. He didn't boast, didn't smile, didn't claim victory. He simply looked at the machine, as if greeting an old friend. The CEO's heart pounded. He had created this challenge to destroy the janitor, but instead the janitor had risen higher. Now, his own promise weighed on him like a chain around his neck. The car. His word. His pride. The employees turned toward him, their faces filled with expectation. They hadn't forgotten his words. If he fixes this, the car is his. The CEO's throat felt dry. He wanted to deny it, to shout, to throw the man out anyway. But he could see it in the employees' eyes. They would never forgive him if he broke his word. His authority was slipping, piece by piece. The janitor's hidden knowledge revealed. The janitor finally spoke again, his voice low but steady. Machines are not puzzles to mock people with. They are lessons. If you respect them, they respond. If you treat them as games, they will remain silent. His words cut through the hall. They weren't just about machines. Everyone felt it. It was about life, about respect, about dignity. The employees nodded slowly, some with tears in their eyes. The CEO clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. His pride was bleeding out in front of everyone. Cliffhanger, the machine continued to hum, alive and strong. The janitor wiped his hands, then turned his calm gaze directly at the CEO. You gave your word, he said quietly but firmly. The room froze. The employees looked from the janitor to the CEO, waiting. The CEO's face turned pale. His lips trembled. For the first time in years, he felt cornered not by a rival businessman, not by a competitor, but by a man everyone had dismissed as invisible. Would he honor his promise or break it? The answer would decide everything. The machine purred steadily, its rhythm echoing through the hall like the steady beat of a living heart. Employees stood frozen, their eyes darting between the janitor and the CEO. The silence was heavier than the weight of any words spoken before. The janitor had done the impossible. Again, he stood calmly, hands folded behind his back, as if this moment belonged not to pride, but to truth. His voice had been quiet, yet it carried more weight than the CEO's loudest commands. You gave your word. Those words now hung in the air like chains around the CEO's neck. The CEO's turmoil. CEO's mind burned with conflict. Rage and humiliation boiled inside him, but so did fear. He looked at the employees, his employees, and saw something dangerous in their eyes. Respect. Not for him, but for the janitor. It was the one thing he could not allow. If I give him the car, I lose my authority. If I deny it, I lose their trust. Either way, I lose. His fists clenched. His nails dug deep into his palms. He felt trapped. The whispering employees. The hall began to buzz with whispers. He has to give the car. A promise is a promise. But will he really do it? If he breaks his word, how can we ever trust him again? The CEO's ears caught every word, each whisper like a dagger slicing at his pride. One bold employee finally spoke aloud, his voice trembling but firm. "Sir, you promised." And he delivered. Others nodded quickly, emboldened by the first voice. Yes, the janitor deserves the car. He kept his side of the deal. The CEO's face darkened. Authority was slipping through his fingers like sand. The CEO's attempt to twist words enough? The CEO thundered, his voice shaking the hall. You all think this is simple? You think fixing a broken machine makes him worthy of a luxury car? He is a janitor. His job is to clean, not to play with engines. He pointed sharply at the janitor. You embarrassed me once with a trick, but you will not make a fool of me again. This was chance. Nothing more, the employees murmured, uneasy. Some lowered their eyes, afraid to defy him openly, but others glanced at the janitor with quiet admiration. The janitor did not respond. His silence was sharper than any argument. The janitor's quiet power, he simply looked at the CEO with calm, steady eyes. No anger, no pride, no desperation, just truth. And that silence terrified the CEO more than any words could. The employees saw it too. They saw the contrast. The CEO raging, his voice full of fear, and the janitor, still and unshaken. A dangerous decision. The CEO knew he was cornered. If he honored his promise, he would hand over his prized car and admit defeat to a janitor in front of everyone. If he broke his word, his authority would never be the same. But pride is a dangerous master. The CEO's lips curled into a cold smile. A car for a janitor? Don't be ridiculous. That promise was a joke, and everyone knows it. Gasps filled the hall. The employees stared at him in disbelief. A few shook their heads. Others muttered angrily under their breath. The janitor's eyes did not move. He simply whispered, almost too softly to hear, "A man's word is not a joke." The employees, changing hearts, the words pierced through the silence. Some employees nodded, their respect for the janitor deepening. They knew the truth. The CEO had broken his word, and in doing so, he had broken something far greater: trust. The CEO felt the shift in the air. It terrified him. His empire was built not only on wealth, but on the loyalty of those around him. If he lost their respect, cracks would appear in his power. But his pride blinded him. He could not bear to bend. The janitor walks away without another word. The janitor turned away. He picked up his cart, wiped his hands with a rag, and walked slowly toward the door. The employees watched him go, their hearts heavy. He had not shouted, not begged, not demanded. He had simply walked away, carrying his dignity like armor. And somehow, that silence felt louder than the CEO's denial. The door closed softly behind him. The CEO's anesthesia sat heavily in his chair, pretending he had one. He smirked, lifted his chin, and forced his voice steady. Let this be a lesson. Respect is earned through position, not through tricks. He is a janitor, nothing more. But the employees did not cheer. They did not nod. They only looked at him with eyes that had changed. The CEO felt it like a shadow creeping over him. Authority slipping, respect crumbling. He had not won. He had only delayed his defeat. That night, when the building finally emptied, the CEO remained alone in his office. The machine still hummed faintly in the hall, a haunting reminder of what had happened. He poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, staring at his reflection in the glass window. But all he saw was a man shaken by a janitor. His chest tightened. Who is he? Where did he learn this? Why does he not fight for recognition? He slammed the glass down, his anger boiling again. I'll find out who he really is, he muttered. No man hides behind a mop and knows machines like that. A dangerous idea began to form in his mind. If he couldn't humiliate the janitor in front of everyone, he would uncover his secrets. And once he had those secrets, he would destroy him. Cliffhanger outside. The janitor walked home in the quiet night, pushing his old bicycle beside him. His clothes were stained, his hands tired, but his eyes still carried calmness. He did not know that behind him the CEO's pride had turned into something darker. A determination not just to defeat him, but to crush him completely. And as the city lights flickered in the distance, Both men carried their own storms, one of pride, one of patience. But only one storm would survive. The story paused there, pulling the audience toward Part 8, where secrets from the janitor's past would begin to surface. The city slept under the cover of darkness, but inside the tall glass building, one man was restless. The CEO sat in his grand office, the lights dim, his desk covered in papers and empty glasses. The soft hum of the revived machine still echoed faintly in the hall, haunting him like a ghost he could not escape. He leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. His reflection stared back at him from the window-sharp suit, expensive watch, but hollow eyes. How could a janitor humiliate me? How could he fix what my engineers could not? The thought burned him from the inside. Pride and fear twisted together until they became something darker. This is no ordinary man. He hides something, and I will find it. The CEO's secret investigation the next morning. The CEO arrived earlier than usual. The employees were surprised. He was never one to show up before the sun. But today, he came with a plan. He called for his personal assistant, a young woman named Clara, sharp-minded and loyal. She entered his office nervously, sensing his foul mood. "Clara," he said coldly, "I want information." "About the janitor?" She blinked. "The janitor, sir?" "Yes." His voice was sharp as steel. "Everything about him. His name, his past, where he worked before. I don't care if you have to dig through trash or talk to old neighbors. Bring me every detail." Clara hesitated. "Sir, he's just a janitor." "Why?" The CEO slammed his fist on the desk, making her flinch. "Do not question me." "Just do it." She bowed her head quickly. "Yes, sir." The janitor's quiet evening. While the CEO plotted, the janitor lived his life in silence. After work, he returned to his small apartment on the edge of the city. The walls were cracked, the furniture old. But it was enough. He prepared a simple meal, washed his hands, and sat by the window. Outside, children played in the street, their laughter carrying hope he had long forgotten. He smiled faintly, though his eyes carried a shadow. On the small table beside him lay an old leather notebook, its pages filled with sketches of machines, notes, and unfinished dreams. Sometimes, late at night, he opened it, reminding himself of the man he used to be, but he never spoke of it. To everyone else, he was only the janitor. Clara's discovery 2 days later. Clara returned to the CEO's office holding a thin file. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Sir," she whispered, placing the file on his desk, "I found something." The CEO snatched it eagerly, flipping through the pages. His eyes moved quickly, and with each line his face grew darker. The janitor was not just a man with a mop. He had once been a top student at a prestigious engineering university. Records showed he had been praised by professors, considered one of the most gifted minds of his generation. But then, suddenly, he had dropped out. No explanation given. No degree earned. His trail faded into years of low-paying jobs, ending here in this building as a janitor. The CEO's heart pounded. So it's true. He was someone. He could have been an engineer. Maybe more. Clara hesitated, then spoke softly. "Sir, the professor's notes said he had a rare talent. They thought he would design great inventions one day." The CEO's hand clenched around the file. Rage and fear twisted inside him. So he hides this. He chooses to sweep floors instead of shine. Why? What is he waiting for? The CEO's jealousy, the knowledge ate at him. The janitor had something the CEO could never buy: a natural genius. The CEO had built his empire with money, connections, and ruthless ambition. But genius? That was a gift beyond reach. He poured himself another drink, staring at the file. He thinks he can live in the shadows. He thinks he can humiliate me. No. I'll drag him into the light. And when I do, I'll destroy him. A subtle change at work. Over the next few days, the CEO's behavior changed. He watched the janitor closely, his eyes following every step, every movement. The employees noticed the tension but dared not speak. The janitor, however, remained the same: calm, silent, invisible. But inside, he sensed the storm building. He could feel the CEO's gaze like a weight on his back, and yet he did not fear it. He had faced storms before, a chance encounter one evening. As the janitor prepared to leave, Clara found him near the back exit. She hesitated, then approached quietly. "Sir," she said softly. The janitor looked up surprised. Few people ever spoke to him directly. "Yes." She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "Be careful, the CEO. He is watching you. He asked me to look into your past." The janitor's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what did you find?" Clara lowered her voice. "That you were once an engineer. A brilliant one." The janitor's face grew still. "His secret was out," Clara continued, her voice trembling. "Why are you here? Why hide your talent?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed, his voice low and tired. "Because sometimes life forces you to bury your dreams. But bury doesn't mean dead." Clara's eyes softened. She wanted to ask more, but footsteps echoed down the hall. She stepped back quickly, whispering, "Just be careful." Then she vanished into the shadows. The janitor stood alone, his thoughts heavy. He knew now that the CEO would not stop. The game had changed. Cliffhanger that night, as the janitor returned home, he found something strange. His apartment door, usually locked tightly, stood slightly open. His heart tightened. He pushed the door slowly. Inside, nothing seemed stolen, but his leather notebook was gone. The one place where his true self lived at the drawings. The ideas, the memories of his gift was missing. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. There was only one man who would do this. The CEO, and for the first time, the janitor's calm eyes darkened with something deeper. Not fear, not anger, determination. The story froze there, the tension sharp, pulling the audience into part 9, where the CEO would use the stolen notebook as a weapon. The night was colder than usual. The janitor sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the empty space on his table where his leather notebook used to be. His fingers brushed the wood as if touching the ghost of what was gone. That notebook was not just paper. It was his memory, his mind, his past and future bound together. Every sketch, every calculation, every unfinished dream lived in those pages. It was the last proof of who he truly was before life crushed him, and now it was. In the CEO's hands, the CEO's triumph at the same time. Inside his luxury office, the CEO sat with the notebook open in front of him. His lips curled into a cruel smile as he turned each page. Complex sketches of machines, precise notes, ideas far beyond what his own engineers could imagine. It was brilliance. Raw and undeniable. "So," the CEO muttered, "this is the truth you've been hiding." He leaned back in his chair, arrogance dripping from his voice. A janitor with a genius mind. How pathetic. He threw it all away. And now, I will use it. For the CEO, this was no longer just about pride. This was about power. If he could claim the janitor's ideas as his own, his empire would grow even stronger. The next morning, the janitor entered the building quietly, as always. But inside, he carried a storm. His eyes scanned the hall, and he noticed the way people whispered, glancing at him strangely. Something had changed. By noon, he was summoned to the CEO's office. He walked slowly, his steps steady, though his chest tightened. The tall doors opened, and there sat the CEO behind his desk, the stolen notebook lying in plain sight. The janitor's eyes froze on it. The CEO smirked. "Looking for this?" The janitor said nothing. The CEO flipped through the pages dramatically. "I must admit, I underestimated you. These notes are extraordinary, far beyond anything my engineers have produced." He leaned forward, his tone sharp. "But why? Why throw it away to mop floors?" Still, the janitor remained silent, his face calm. The CEO slammed the notebook shut. "No matter. What's important is this: these ideas belong to me now. You're nothing but the man who cleans my floors." The janitor speaks, finally. The janitor spoke, his voice low but steady. You stole what isn't yours. The CEO laughed harshly. Stole? No, you abandoned it. You left your brilliance to rot in an old notebook. I'll give it life. And when the world praises me, you'll still be here, sweeping dust. The janitor's eyes darkened. Genius without honesty is poison. You will choke on it. The CEO's smile faltered for a second, but he quickly covered it with arrogance. We'll see. Whispers in the office's news began to spread through the company. Some employees overheard fragments of the CEO bragging about his new ideas, though no one knew where they came from. Clara, however, noticed the notebook on the CEO's desk. Her heart sank. She knew instantly what had happened. That evening, she found the janitor again in the hallway. He took it, didn't he? Your notebook. The janitor nodded slowly. Clara clenched her fists. That's not right. He'll take the credit for everything you dreamed of. He'll crush you. The janitor looked at her calmly. He cannot crush what does not belong to him. The truth has a way of coming out. Clara's eyes filled with worry. But what if it doesn't? He's powerful. He controls the story. The janitor gave a faint, tired smile. Then the story is not over yet. The CEO's public announcement 2 days later. The CEO gathered his top executives and investors for a special presentation. The large conference room buzzed with excitement. People expected a breakthrough, something new that would strengthen the company's future. The janitor, though not invited, was ordered to clean the hall just before the meeting. As he worked silently in the background, he heard the CEO's booming voice. Ladies and gentlemen, today I present to you a vision for the future of our company. Designs and concepts that will revolutionize our machines. He lifted the janitor's notebook, pretending it was his own creation. The audience clapped. Some gasped in admiration as he displayed diagrams and spoke with pride. The janitor stood in the shadows, his mop in hand, his heart heavy. Each word was a dagger, but he did not move. Not yet. Clara's dilemma, from the back of the room. Clara watched with a trembling heart. She knew the truth. She knew whose mind had created those designs. But if she spoke now, she risked her job, her safety, everything. Her eyes shifted to the janitor standing silently near the door. His face showed no anger, only quiet strength. It was as if he was waiting for the right moment, as if he trusted that time itself would reveal the truth. Clara's chest tightened. How can he stay so calm when his life's work is being stolen in front of everyone? A silent promise that night, the janitor returned to his apartment, emptier than before. He sat at his window, the streetlights glowing faintly outside. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, they can steal pages. They can steal words. But they cannot steal what lives in my mind. They cannot steal who I am. His voice was calm, but inside. Determination burned. A storm is coming, the CEO, drunk with his new power, celebrated his achievement. But in his arrogance, he made a mistake. He underestimated the janitor's quiet patience. He believed the janitor was broken, humiliated, powerless. But the janitor was waiting, watching, planning, because one truth burned stronger than any lie. Genius cannot be hidden forever. Cliffhanger as the CEO left his office late that night. He found something strange on his desk. A single sheet of paper. On it was a new design, far more advanced than anything in the notebook. A design the CEO had never seen before. At the bottom, written in neat handwriting, were 3 words. You are watched. The CEO's face turned pale. His hands shook as he looked around the empty office. The janitor's calm face flashed in his mind. For the first time, fear crawled into his heart. The story froze, there leaving the audience burning with questions. Who left the paper? Was it the janitor? How did he create something beyond the stolen notes? And what would the CEO do now, knowing he was no longer in control? The tall glass building glimmered in the sunlight the next morning. But inside the CEO's office, shadows stretched longer than usual. He sat at his polished desk, staring at the single sheet of paper he had found the night before. The design on the page was brilliant, far beyond anything in the stolen notebook. And those 3 words at the bottom? "You are watched," echoed in his mind like a curse. For the first time, his power felt fragile. A restless night, he had hardly slept. Every sound in his mansion had seemed louder. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, the rustle of trees outside his window had all made him jump. By morning, his eyes were bloodshot, his hands unsteady. He poured himself coffee, but it did nothing to calm him. How? How could the janitor create something beyond what I stole? How does he always stay ahead? The CEO's pride cracked. Beneath the arrogance, a seed of fear had begun to grow. A silent worker, meanwhile, the janitor moved through the building as usual. Mop in hand, quiet steps, calm eyes. He greeted no one, and no one dared disturb him. Yet to those who watched closely, something was different. His movements were slower, heavier, like a man carrying secrets too big for his shoulders. But in his silence, there was power, Clara noticed. She followed him with her eyes, sensing that he was holding back storms no one could see, the CEO's growing paranoia. CEO called for Clara. She entered his office carefully, her eyes flicking to the papers still lying on his desk. "Clara," he said, his voice sharp but trembling at the edges. "Did anyone come into this office last night?" She shook her head. "No, sir. The building was locked. Security cameras showed nothing unusual." The CEO slammed his fist on the desk. "Then how do you explain this?" He shoved the paper toward her. Clara's eyes scanned the design, her breath catching. It was beyond anything she had ever seen. She looked at him carefully. "Sir, maybe you should ask him." The CEO froze. "Ask who?" "The janitor." The CEO's face twisted with anger. "No, I will not bow to him. He thinks he can scare me, haunt me with his genius. But he is nothing." Yet even as he shouted, his voice cracked. Clara saw it, the fear he tried to hide. Hallway whispers as days passed. Whispers filled the company halls. Rumors spread that the CEO's new invention had flaws. Engineers struggled to bring the notebook's designs to life. Something was missing, key details only the original mind could provide. Meanwhile, employees noticed the CEO's strange behavior. He looked over his shoulder often, jumped at small noises, and sometimes barked at shadows. His powerful image began to crumble. The janitor, however, remained steady, sweeping the same halls. As if untouched by the chaos, Clara's secret choice, one evening. Clara approached the janitor in the quiet stairwell. Her voice was low, urgent. "He's falling apart," she whispered. "He can't handle it. The designs don't work without you. He's angry, afraid. I think he knows you're the one who left that paper." The janitor looked at her calmly. "And you, do you know it was me?" Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, because no one else could do this." "But why? Why are you pushing him like this?" The janitor's eyes grew distant. "Because pride must face the truth. He tried to steal what was never his. Now he will learn that brilliance cannot be owned." Clara's chest tightened. "But be careful. He's dangerous when cornered." The janitor gave a faint smile. "So am I." The CEO's breaking point that night. The CEO sat alone in his office long after everyone had left. The stolen notebook lay open, pages scattered. Yet none of it made sense anymore. He pressed his hands to his head, muttering to himself. "Why can't I understand it? Why can't my engineers make it work?" Then, from the corner of the room, he thought he heard a soft sound, the faint scrape of a broom. He spun around. The office was empty. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Silence. But in his mind, he saw the janitor's calm face, those steady eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. Fear twisted in his stomach. Dangerous decision. The next morning, the CEO made a decision. He called Clara into his office again. "I want surveillance on him," he ordered coldly. "Everywhere he goes, every corner he sweeps, every step he takes, I want to know." Clara's eyes widened. "Sir, that's illegal. I don't care." He snapped. "Do it, or I'll find someone else who will." Clara left, torn between loyalty and conscience. Deep inside, she knew the CEO was crossing a dangerous line, a small victory later that day. As the janitor worked in a quiet corridor, he noticed something unusual, a small camera hidden near the ceiling. He didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly finished his work, then walked away. Hours later, when the CEO checked the feed, the camera showed nothing but static. His face turned pale. How did he know? How did he disable it without even touching it? Paranoia consumed him. He began to feel that the janitor was not just a man, but something more, a shadow. A ghost, a mind always one step ahead. Hook for the next part that night. The CEO returned home exhausted, his nerves shattered. But when he entered his study, his blood froze. On his desk, next to his glass of whiskey, lay another piece of paper. This time it wasn't a design. It was a message written in the same neat handwriting. Truth always returns. The CEO's hand shook violently. He looked around his locked mansion, the alarms armed. The guards outside? Yet someone had been here. His voice broke into the silence. What are you? But only the ticking clock answered. The suspense grew sharper, dragging the audience to part 11 where the CEO's fear would turn into obsession, pushing him toward a dangerous plan. The mansion was silent. But inside the CEO's study, silence turned into a roar in his head. His hand shook as he stared at the second message lying on his desk. Truth always returns. Those 3 words haunted him. How had it gotten there? The doors were locked, alarms active, guards alert. Yet still, the message appeared as if the janitor's shadow could slip through walls. The CEO poured himself another glass of whiskey, his breath shallow. He whispered to himself, he's not normal. No, he's something else. Something I need to crush before he destroys me. Fear had grown too large to ignore. And with fear came obsession. Sleepless nights, the CEO stopped sleeping. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow seemed like a figure watching him. He ordered his security to patrol day and night. He doubled the guards at his mansion. Yet deep inside, he knew none of it mattered, because what haunted him wasn't the janitor's body, it was his mind. A mind sharper, calmer, and far more dangerous than his own. If I can't control him, I must erase him. Clara notices the change at the office. Clara noticed how different her boss had become. His once confident voice cracked during meetings. He snapped at employees without reason, demanded reports at impossible speeds, and often paused mid-sentence, distracted by invisible threats. One afternoon, she found him in his office, staring at the notebook again. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie loose, his hair unkempt. Sir, she said softly, you need rest. You're pushing yourself too hard. He glared at her, his voice low and cold. Rest? Do you think I can rest when a janitor mocks me from the shadows? He thinks he's clever, but I'll show him. I'll show everyone. Clara stepped back. The man before her wasn't just proud anymore. He was dangerous. The janitors come while the CEO unraveled. The janitor remained calm. Each night, after his long shifts, he sat by his small window, staring at the city lights. His heart still ached for the notebook that had been stolen. But he refused to let despair consume him. He had something the CEO would never understand: patience, and he knew something else. People like the CEO always destroyed themselves. Pride was poison, and sooner or later, it turned inward. Still, he prepared quietly. His mind worked on designs beyond anything in the stolen pages. If the CEO thought he had one, he was already mistaken. The CEO's dangerous idea one night. While pacing his study, the CEO whispered to himself, "If I cannot silence his mind, then I will silence him completely." The thought froze him at first. He had always built his empire with ruthless business tactics, yes, but never with blood. Yet now, cornered by fear, he considered the unthinkable. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A man from the darker side of the city. Someone who didn't ask questions, only delivered results. When the line connected, The CEO's voice was firm, though his hand trembled. I need a problem. Removed Clara's discovery, Clara stayed late at the office that same night, organizing files. As she passed the CEO's door, she overheard fragments of his call. A janitor. Yes. Quiet job. No traces. Her blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, listening in horror. When she heard the call end, she slipped away silently, her heart pounding. She knew now the CEO was planning something irreversible. She had two choices: stay silent and protect herself, or warn the janitor and risk everything. Her conscience screamed the answer. A secret warning later that night. Clara found the janitor in the basement, cleaning quietly. She rushed to him, her voice shaking. You're in danger, she whispered. The janitor looked up calmly. Danger is always near. What kind of danger do you mean? Clara swallowed hard. The CEO. He made a call. He's planning to get rid of you. The janitor's eyes held steady, not a flicker of fear. I see. Clara grabbed his arm desperately. Don't you understand? He's serious. You need to leave this place. You need to hide. The janitor gently freed his arm, his voice calm. Running never solves the truth. If he has chosen this path, then let him walk it. But he should remember those who dig graves for others often fall into them first. Clara's heart raced. How could he remain so calm, so certain, when death itself was near? The CEO sets the trap the next evening. The CEO left the office earlier than usual. To his employees it seemed unusual, but harmless. To him, it was the beginning of the end. He had arranged everything. The janitor's shift would take him into a remote storage area in the basement that night. There, the men he hired would be waiting. Quick, quiet, unseen. As he drove home, the CEO smiled for the first time in weeks. By morning, he whispered, this ghost will be gone. The basement, the janitor walked into the dark basement, mop in hand. The flickering lights above cast long shadows across the floor. He knew. From the moment he stepped in, he felt that the air too still, the silence too heavy. Someone was here. He continued walking calmly, each step deliberate. His eyes moved across the room, catching the faintest glint of metal in the shadows, and then, from behind the shelves, figures emerged. Two men, dressed in black, their faces hidden. The janitor stopped. His mop still in hand, his face unreadable. Cliffhanger, one of the men spoke, his voice low and rough. Sorry, old man. Wrong place, wrong time. They moved closer, but the janitor didn't step back. He didn't run. Instead, he raised his eyes, calm and steady, and said softly, No, it is the right place, the right time. The story froze, their suspense thick as a knife. Would the janitor survive the trap? What hidden strength or plan did he have? The audience is pulled toward Part 12, where the confrontation in the basement will explode. The basement smelled of dust and old iron. The weak lights above flickered, painting the walls in restless shadows. The janitor stood still in the middle of the room, mop in hand, his back straight and his eyes calm. From the dark corners, the two men hired by the CEO stepped forward. Their boots echoed on the concrete floor. One held a metal pipe. The other carried something sharp, glinting faintly under the light. Easy job, one of them muttered. Quick and quiet, the other grinned. He's just a janitor. But the janitor didn't move. His calm presence filled the space, as if he had been expecting them all along. His eyes lifted slowly, steady and unafraid. The first move, the man with the pipe, lunged first, swinging hard. The janitor stepped aside smoothly, his movements quiet and precise. The pipe struck the floor, sparks flying. The janitor's mop handle spun in his hands, blocking the second strike. Then, pushing the man back with surprising strength, the second attacker rushed with the blade, slashing fast. But the janitor ducked, his body moving with the grace of someone who had seen danger before. The blade cut through air, missing by inches. Calm in chaos, the janitor didn't fight with rage. Every move was measured, controlled. His face remained calm, as if he was sweeping the floor instead of fighting for his life. The men grew frustrated. "What is this guy?" One shouted, his breath heavy. The janitor's voice was steady. "You should not be here. Leave now, and no harm will come to you." They laughed bitterly. "You're the one who won't be leaving," but their laughter cracked. Fear began to slip in. Shadows of the pastas, he blocked another strike. Flashes of memory rushed through the janitor's mind, his younger days. When he wasn't holding a mop, but blueprints, tools, and inventions. Times when he had trained not just his mind, but his hands. Building and fixing with precision, his skills were not just of machines, they were of discipline. And discipline never left a man. The turning point, the man with the pipe charged again. This time, the janitor sidestepped, swung the mop handle low, and struck the man's legs. The attacker stumbled, crashing to the floor with a groan. Before the second man could react, the janitor twisted his wrist, disarming the blade and letting it clatter onto the concrete. Now both attackers were on the ground. Groaning, their eyes wide with disbelief, the janitor stood over them. His mop handle pressed lightly against one man's throat, not to kill, but to remind them of the line they had crossed. His voice was cold but calm. "Tell your master, the truth cannot be erased, no matter how deep he buries it." The men froze. They had never faced someone like him, silent, strong, and unshaken. A warning sent back, the janitor stepped away, lowering his mop. "Go," he said, "and never return." The men, battered and shaken, scrambled to their feet and stumbled out of the basement. Fear clung to them heavier than their wounds. They'd come for an easy job. Instead, they had met a man who didn't break. The CEO waits at the same hour. The CEO sat in his mansion, glass of whiskey in hand, waiting for the call. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "By now," he whispered, "it should be over." His phone buzzed. He answered quickly. "Is it done?" But the voice on the other end was shaky, fearful. "Boss, you didn't tell us he was like that. He's not just a janitor." "We couldn't." The CEO's hand tightened around the phone. "What do you mean you couldn't?" The man stammered. "He let us live. But he sent a message. He said the truth cannot be erased." The CEO froze. His glass slipped from his hand. Shattering on the floor, the line went dead. Clara learns the truth the next morning. Clara noticed the whispers around the office. The guards had spread the story quietly. The two men were seen leaving the building bruised and shaken. Muttering about the janitor, she found the janitor in the stairwell again, cleaning as if nothing had happened. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "They came for you?" The janitor's eyes lifted to hers, calm as ever. "Yes, and you. You fought them?" His voice was low. "I defended myself. Nothing more." Clara's chest tightened. "But why let them go? They'll only return." The janitor looked away, his gaze distant. "Sometimes mercy is a sharper blade than revenge. Their fear will speak louder than their silence." The CEO's dissented me, while the CEO's paranoia grew darker. His plan had failed, and worse, it had backfired. The men he hired now whispered about the janitor's strange strength, spreading rumors in the underworld. The CEO couldn't escape it. Wherever he turned, the janitor's calm face haunted him. In the boardroom, he lost focus. At home, he jumped at shadows. His empire stood strong, but inside he was collapsing. "He's not just a man. He's something more, and I can't control him." Clara's quiet resolve. Clara watched it all. The CEO unraveling. The janitor standing steady. Her heart wrestled with fear and loyalty, but deep inside she knew the truth. One man was built on pride, the other on strength of spirit, and the battle between them was only beginning. Cliffhanger late that night. The CEO returned to his office, exhausted and trembling. He locked the doors, closed the blinds, and sat at his desk. But when he turned on the lamp, his heart nearly stopped. There, on the polished surface of his desk, lay a small piece of the mop handle, broken, splintered, placed neatly on top of his stolen notebook. Attached was a note. "Cannot mop away the truth." The CEO's breath hitched. His hands shook violently. How? How did he get in here? The walls seemed to close in, the silence heavier than ever. Fear no longer whispered in his ear, it screamed. The broken piece of mop handle lay on the CEO's desk like a curse. He stared at it for a long time, his breath shallow, skin pale. The note beneath it, "You cannot mop away the truth," burned in his eyes. The words didn't just threaten him. They mocked him. The CEO slammed his fist on the desk, veins rising on his temples. "How?" he shouted into the empty room. The doors were locked, the windows sealed. How did he get in here? But no answer came. Only the hum of the air conditioner and the sound of his own heavy breathing. Sleepless nights that night. The CEO did not sleep. He sat in his mansion, pacing like a trapped animal. Every sound made him jump, the ticking of the clock, the rustle of curtains in the breeze, even his own heartbeat. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the janitor's calm face. Not angry, not cruel, just calm. That calmness was worse than rage, meant control. It meant power. The CEO muttered to himself, "He's just a janitor. Just a man with a mop. He's nothing. Nothing." But the words felt hollow. His empire was shaking, not because of a rival businessman or a government law, but because of a single quiet man he had underestimated, the board noticed later. The board of directors gathered in the conference room. Their eyes were sharp, their whispers cold. One of them leaned forward. "We've noticed something troubling. Investors are nervous. Employees are unsettled. Rumors are spreading," another added, "they say. The janitor humiliated you. That he fixed what none of us could. And now, some even whisper, he's more of a leader than you." The CEO's jaw clenched. Lies. Baseless lies. But the men and women around the table didn't look convinced. They exchanged glances, and their silence was louder than any accusation. Clara sat quietly at the far end of the table. She watched her father's hands tremble slightly as he clutched his pen. She had never seen him like this. Her father had always been the man of power, the man who commanded rooms with a single glance. But now he looked like prey, cornered by his own shadows. Clara lowered her gaze, hiding the storm in her heart. How long before he breaks completely? A desperate plan that evening, the CEO retreated to his private study. He poured glass after glass of whiskey, his thoughts spinning faster than the ceiling fan above him. "I can't let him stay," he whispered. "If he remains, everything crumbles. My control, my respect, my empire." His eyes darted to the phone. A number burned in his memory, an old contact. A man who dealt with problems in ways the law never touched. The CEO's finger hovered over the dial. Sweat trickled down his temple. He had already tried once to remove the janitor, and it had failed. Did he dare try again? He slammed the phone down, his voice cracking. No more failures. This time, it must end. The janitor remains unshaken, while the CEO unraveled. The janitor remained the same. Each morning, he came early, cleaned the halls, nodded politely to the staff, and spoke little. But the employees noticed. The way his eyes seemed to see everything. The way his silence carried weight. The way broken things never stayed broken when he was around to them. He was no longer just the man with the mop. He was something else, a quiet protector, hidden strength inside their walls. Clara noticed it most of all. Clara confronts him one afternoon. She found him repairing a broken light in the stairwell. He worked slowly, carefully, his hands steady. "Why do you stay?" she asked softly. The janitor looked at her, his expression calm. "This is my work." "No," Clara pressed. "It's more than that. You could leave. You don't need this place. So why stay knowing what my father is doing to you?" The janitor lowered his gaze for a moment, then answered quietly, "Because running does not erase truth, and hiding does not bring peace. Sometimes you must stand where fate has placed you until the truth speaks for itself." Clara's throat tightened. His words carried weight she couldn't fully understand. She felt them deeply. The CEO's breaking point that night, the CEO's paranoia exploded. He stormed through his mansion, shouting at servants, slamming doors. He smashed mirrors, shouting at his own reflection. "You're losing everything." To a janitor. A nobody. Finally, he collapsed into his chair, shaking, his face pale with sweat. He reached for the phone again. This time, he dialed. The voice on the other end answered, cold and sharp. "It's been a long time. What do you want?" The CEO's voice cracked. I want him gone, forever. Do whatever it takes," the voice replied. "Consider it done." The line went dead. The CEO sat back, trembling, his hand clutching his glass. Relief washed over him, but it was thin, fragile. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this would not end the way he hoped. Clara overhears, but he was not alone. Outside his study door, Clara had been standing silently, her hand pressed against the wood. She had heard everything. Her heart pounded. He's going to do it again. He's going to hurt him. Tears filled her eyes, but her jaw tightened with resolve. For the first time, she felt she had to choose not between her father and a stranger, but between right and wrong. Cliffhanger later that night. The janitor finished his work and locked up the storage closet. The halls were empty, the silence heavy. But as he stepped into the parking lot, his sharp eyes noticed movement. Shadows shifted near the far wall. Figures stood waiting. His grip tightened on his cart handle. His breath slowed. From the darkness, a voice whispered, "This time, you won't walk away." The janitor stood still, calm as ever. The night air grew colder, the silence sharper. The night was heavy with silence. The company parking lot stretched wide under the dim glow of street lamps. The janitor pushed his cart slowly across the concrete, his steps calm, his eyes sharp. But in the shadows, he felt the weight of eyes on him. He stopped. The wheels of the cart squeaked softly, then stilled. From the far side, 3 men stepped out. Broad, dressed in dark clothes, their faces hidden by caps. Behind them, 2 more emerged, closing the way to the street. The janitor's path was sealed. One of them smirked. "No tricks this time, old man. Tonight's your last shift. Calm before the storm." The janitor's hands rested lightly on the cart handle. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You've been sent here. But do you know why?" The men laughed coldly. "Don't care why? Just care about the money." The janitor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you've already lost." Before they could respond, he stepped back slowly, scanning the space. He had no weapon, no plan, but his mind and discipline. Yet that was enough. The first strike, the nearest man rushed forward, swinging a crowbar. The janitor sidestepped smoothly, his movement precise. The crowbar crashed against the cart, sending tools scattering across the ground. In that same moment, the janitor bent low, grabbing a wrench from the spilled tools. With a swift strike, he knocked the crowbar out of the attacker's hands. The man stumbled back. Shocked, another came from behind with a chain, swinging it wide. The janitor raised his arm, letting the chain wrap around it, then twisted sharply, pulling the man forward and slamming him against the cart. Gasps and curses filled the night. Clara's arrival from the stairwell above. Clara watched in terror. She had followed secretly, knowing her father had arranged another attack. She had hoped to stop it, but now she was too late. Her heart pounded as she gripped the railing. The janitor moved with calm strength, fending off men twice his size. But there were too many, Clara whispered to herself, tears in her eyes. "I can't just watch. I have to do something." She slipped quietly down the steps, her fists clenched, her fear burning into courage. The fight grows. The remaining men closed in, circling like wolves. One struck with a knife, another with a metal rod. The janitor's wrench deflected the rod, sparks flying in the night. He spun low, striking the man's legs, sending him crashing to the ground. The knife slashed near his chest, tearing his shirt, but he twisted just in time, the blade missing flesh. With a sharp move, he grabbed the attacker's wrist, bending it until the knife dropped. The men cursed louder, frustration rising. This was supposed to be easy. But the janitor fought with quiet precision. Every move controlled, never wasted. Still, they were many. He was one, and even discipline had limits. Clara steps in just as one man raised the crowbar high to strike the janitor's back. A sudden sound cut through the night bang. It wasn't a gunshot, but the loud slam of a fire extinguisher. Clara had lifted it from the stairwell wall and smashed it against the ground. The sound startled the attackers, making them freeze for a moment. Clara's voice trembled, but she shouted anyway. "Stop. Leave him alone." The men turned, sneering. "What's this? Little princess wants to play hero?" But the janitor's eyes sharpened. He had not expected her here. And now, everything changed. The shift in power, the attackers moved toward Clara, grinning. "Your father will pay extra if we teach you a lesson too." The janitor stepped forward swiftly, his voice firm, commanding. "Touch her, and you will not leave this place standing." The men laughed, but unease flickered in their eyes. They had faced his strength already. Now his tone carried something deeper, a promise. The janitor moved between Clara and the men, his body shielding hers. Clara clutched the extinguisher tightly, fear mixing with determination. For the first time, they weren't alone in this battle. Turning the tide, the janitor swung the wrench, striking the crowbar hard enough to send it clattering away. Clara, trembling but brave, lifted the extinguisher and sprayed it. A thick cloud of white foam burst out, blinding the attackers. They coughed, stumbling back, eyes burning in the confusion. The janitor struck fast, one man down with a sweep of the legs, another disarmed with a twist of the wrist. The remaining attackers cursed, wiping their eyes, stumbling in the foam. They realized the truth, they were losing again. "Fall back," one shouted. "This isn't worth it." Within seconds, the men disappeared into the night, leaving their weapons scattered on the ground. Aftermath, the parking lot grew silent again. Foam drifted slowly across the concrete like mist. The janitor stood tall, his chest rising with steady breaths. Clara, still clutching the extinguisher, trembled. Her knees felt weak. "You shouldn't have been here," the janitor said softly. His voice firm but not angry. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't let them hurt you. I couldn't let my father." Her voice broke. The janitor looked at her quietly, then placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Courage is not about fighting shadows. It is about choosing light. Even when darkness surrounds you. Clara's heart tightened at his words. The CEO learns hours later. CEO sat in his mansion, waiting again. His phone buzzed, and he answered quickly. "Well," he demanded. But the voice on the other end was filled with panic. "We failed again. He's unstoppable. And your daughter, she was there." The CEO froze.
"What?" "She helped him."
She stood with him. The CEO's hand trembled so violently he nearly dropped the phone. His voice cracked with rage. No, she betrayed me. My own blood." He hurled the phone across the room, his eyes wild, his breath ragged. "This janitor is tearing my world apart piece by piece." Cliffhanger, the CEO stormed to his desk, grabbing the stolen notebook. He flipped through its pages with desperate eyes, his hands shaking. "If I can't destroy him," he whispered, "I'll use what he created. I'll make it mine before he takes everything." His face twisted with madness as he slammed the notebook shut. At that same moment, the janitor stood at the edge of the dark parking lot with Clara beside him. The night air was cold, but Clara felt warmth in his presence. Yet deep inside, the janitor knew this was not the end. The true battle had not even begun. The CEO sat in his office, the stolen notebook spread open across his desk. His eyes were bloodshot, his fingers trembling as they traced over the faded ink sketches. The lines were clean, precise, filled with ideas beyond ordinary machines. But to him, they weren't ideas, they were weapons. "If I can't crush him with fear," he muttered, "then I'll crush him with his own genius." For weeks, he locked himself in the study, surrounded by engineers and secret consultants. He gave them the stolen designs, demanding results, demanding speed. "Build it," he ordered. "I don't care how much it costs. Just make it work. The engineers hesitated. Sir, these designs are complicated. Some don't even make sense then. Make them make sense. The CEO roared, slamming his fist on the table. Do you think I pay you to complain? The room fell silent. Fear moved them to obey. Clara watches the obsession. Clara saw the change immediately. Her father barely ate, barely slept. He lived inside his office, chasing blueprints he barely understood. At night, she heard him pacing, muttering to himself, tearing pages out of the notebook and crumpling them in rage when they refused to yield their secrets. She tried to speak to him. Father, she whispered one evening, this isn't you. You're losing yourself. He turned on her sharply, his eyes wild. I'm finding myself. Don't you see? With this, I will rise higher than ever. No janitor, no man, no shadow will stand over me again. Clara's heart broke. He wasn't building his empire. He was destroying it with his own hands. The janitor knows, meanwhile. The janitor worked silently in the building, watching, listening. He saw the new machines being tested late at night, saw the engineers moving nervously, carrying sketches they didn't understand. He recognized them immediately. They were his. But he didn't rage, didn't despair. Instead, he simply shook his head. They will not work, he murmured to himself. Not without the pieces only I carry here. He touched his temple gently, because what the CEO never realized was that the notebook was incomplete. It held designs, yes, but not the soul of them. That soul lived only in the janitor's mind. Failures, days turned into weeks. And the CEO's mansion echoed with shouts and crashes. One by one, the prototypes built from the stolen notebook failed. Engines overheated. Circuits burned. Designs collapsed under their own weight. The CEO's rage grew darker with every failure. He threw chairs, shattered glasses, fired engineers who dared speak of limits. You think I care about your excuses? He bellowed. Do it again. Do it right. But the notebook betrayed him. The more he forced it, the more it slipped away, like sand through his fingers. The world begins to notice. Investors began to ask questions. Why was so much money vanishing into secret projects? Why were results not appearing? Whispers spread whispers that the great CEO had lost control, that he was gambling everything on madness. His rivals circled like vultures. Employees murmured in the halls. Even the board began to doubt, and through it all, the janitor cleaned the floors quietly, watching the empire begin to crack. Clara's pain one night. Clara found her father slumped over his desk, his head buried in the notebook. Empty glasses littered the table, the smell of whiskey strong in the air. Father, she whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. He jerked awake, eyes bloodshot, face pale. Clara, do you see? Do you see what I'm doing? She looked at the broken pages, the failed machines outside the window. I see what you're losing. His face twisted. No, I'm winning. This book is mine now. It's mine. And when I make it work, they'll all bow to me again. Clara's eyes filled with tears. No, Father, you're bowing to it. The janitor's quiet words the next evening. Clara found the janitor in the stairwell again, polishing the railings. Her voice was soft, filled with worry. He's losing everything, she said. The notebook. It's eating him alive. The janitor nodded slowly, his eyes steady, because it was never his to carry. Truth borrowed is truth broken. It will not serve him. It will only consume him. Clara's hands trembled. Then what will happen to him? The janitor looked at her quietly. His silence was heavier than words. Desperation peaked at last. The CEO reached his breaking point. One stormy night after another failed test ended in sparks and smoke. He grabbed the notebook and stormed into his office. Enough, he shouted, throwing pages across the room. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder shook the walls, but his voice rose above it all. You think you can mock me? He shouted at the notebook as if it were alive. You think you can betray me? No, I am the master. I am the one in control. He ripped out pages, threw them into the fireplace, watching them curl and burn. His laughter echoed, wild and broken. But when the flames died, he froze. Because among the ashes, one page refused to burn. It lay there untouched. The ink glowing faintly in the firelight, the CEO's eyes widened. His hands shook as he picked it up. The page showed a design unlike the others, strange, complex, almost alive. His breath quickened. This is it. This is the one. Cliffhanger. The CEO clutched the page to his chest. His eyes wild with obsession. This will save me, he whispered. This will prove I am greater than him. But outside his window, in the storm's lightning, a shadow stood watching the janitor. His calm eyes reflected the glow of thunder as he whispered softly to himself. It begins. The storm had passed. But inside the CEO's mansion, a different storm raged. His eyes burned as he clutched the one page that had survived the fire. The design on it glowed in his mind, something powerful, something alive. He didn't understand all of it, but he didn't care. He believed it was the key, the crown jewel that would prove his greatness. This is mine, he whispered, holding it against his chest. Not his. Mine. He summoned his engineers, his scientists, his workers. He threw money, power, threats, whatever it took. Build this, he commanded. No matter the cost. The men and women looked uneasy, but none dared disobey. They began work on the strange design, though its meaning twisted and confused them. Clarice Pleaklara watched in despair as the mansion filled with blueprints, machines, sparks, and smoke. Father, please, she begged one evening, standing in his study. This isn't saving you. It's destroying you. He turned sharply, his face pale, his hands trembling, but his eyes blazing. You don't understand, he snapped. This is the key to everything. With this, the world will bow to me again. He will bow to me. Clara's voice broke. He doesn't want you to bow. He just wants you to stop. But her words couldn't reach him. Pride had deafened his ears, and obsession had blinded his eyes. The janitor prepares in the quiet basement of the company. The janitor polished the stair rails, mopped the floors, and fixed the flickering lights. But behind that calm routine, he prepared. He knew what page the CEO had found. He knew the danger it carried. That page was never meant to stand alone. It was part of something greater. Without balance, it was destruction waiting to happen. He whispered to himself, truth twisted becomes poison. He thinks it is power. But power without wisdom devours its master first. The unveiling weeks later. The CEO gathered his board, investors, and the press in the great hall of the company. Behind the curtains stood the machine towering, gleaming, wires coiled like snakes, sparks glowing faintly along its sides. The CEO stood at the podium, his smile wide, his voice trembling with false confidence. Tonight, he declared, I show you the future. My invention will change the world. No rival, no enemy, no shadow can stand against me now. Clara sat in the front row, her hands clenched in her lap. Her eyes darted nervously toward the side door because she knew the janitor was there, silent, waiting. The curtains drew back. Gasps filled the hall. The machine roared to life, lights flashing, gears grinding. But even in its grandeur, something felt wrong. Its movements were jagged, unbalanced, like a beast chained by force. The warning from the side of the hall, the janitor stepped forward, his steps calm but firm. His voice carried across the room. Stop this. The crowd turned, murmuring. The CEO's smile faltered when he saw who it was. His face twisted with rage. You, he shouted. You dare come here? This is my night, my triumph. The janitor's eyes stayed calm. That design was never yours to command. It is incomplete. If you start it, it will not obey you. It will consume you. Laughter rippled through the board, though uneasy. The CEO threw his arms wide. He lies. He's jealous. He wants to steal my glory. Clara rose, her voice shaking but strong. No, he's telling the truth. Father, please listen. But her father's pride roared louder than her plea. The machine turns. The CEO slammed his hand on the console. Activate it. The machine screamed to life. Lights blazed, gears spun faster, energy crackled in the air. The crowd gasped, some applauding nervously, others backing away. For a moment, it seemed magnificent. Then the first spark flew, then another. The machine groaned, metal grinding, wires bursting. Lights flickered violently. The energy inside it had no control, no harmony. It was tearing itself apart. The CEO shouted, "No. Stay. Keep it running." But the engineers backed away in terror. The showdown, the janitor stepped onto the stage, walking calmly toward the raging machine. Sparks lit the air around him, but his eyes stayed steady. "Step back," he said firmly, looking at the CEO. But the CEO shook his head violently, clutching the page in his trembling hands. "No, this is mine. You can't take it from me." The janitor's voice was cold, but calm. "You never had it. You only held its shadow." The machine roared louder, a blinding light filling the hall. Clara screamed, covering her face as the crowd stampeded toward the exits. Only two men stood their ground: the CEO, trembling with pride, and the janitor, steady with truth. The final choice. The janitor stepped closer. "End this." "Before it ends you?" The CEO's face twisted, tears mixing with sweat. His voice cracked. "If I end it, then what am I? Nothing. Just a man. Just like him." The janitor looked at him steadily. "Better to be nothing with truth than everything with lies." The CEO's hand shook violently as he looked between the console and the page in his grip. His empire, his pride, his daughter's tearful face, they all blurred together in his mind. "Father, please," Clara cried, reaching for him. "Cliffhanger," the machine screamed one final time. Sparks burst like lightning. The ground shook beneath their feet. The CEO raised the page high, his eyes filled with madness and despair. "I will not bow," he shouted. The janitor lunged forward, and the hall exploded with blinding white light.